Welcome to Tittlebits of History. Many of us have had the unfortunate experience of having to put down a family pet. I actually had a friend of mine not too long ago who had to put down her cat that she had for 15 years and that she raises from a kitten. And it was not only painful for her, of course, because she had to say goodbye to a friend that she had for 15 years, but it was painful for me to see my friend have to mourn her cat. But luckily, in today's world, we actually have a means to put animals down in a very painless way, basically putting them to sleep with modern medicine and methods. But unfortunately, back in the day, they didn't have that. You basically had to, take your family dog out if they were sick or dying and shoot them, Old Yeller style. And of course, wasn't very pleasant, not only for the dog, but also not very pleasant for the owner, who had to physically pull the trigger and end the life of something that they love. But some people had a little bit better idea on how to do this without having to pull a trigger. And one of these fellas' name was George Mechan. Now, this story was recorded in the Mercersburg Journal on September the 5th, 1902, and it's a report that comes out of Fulton County, Pennsylvania, where a man named George Mechan, who happened to live in a home, a main house with a summer kitchen, most likely detached and sitting away from it, but next to the main house. He was living there with his wife and baby, and he and his faithful dog. Now, the dog, he came down with a disease, according to the report, and George Mechan decided that he was going to have to end the life of his pet. In order to do that, he didn't want to pull the trigger, obviously, so he devised a better way that would be painless to the dog and also painless to him, because he wouldn't actually have to physically pull a trigger, and he wouldn't have to see his dog die. His plan was he was going to take the dog out away from the house into a wooded area. He was going to tie the dog to a tree, and then he was going to tie 2 sticks of dynamite to the dog's tail. He was going to light the fuse, and then he was going to run. So one day, while his wife and their baby was out in the garden behind the house, Mr. Mechan decided that he was going to do the deed. So he took the dog out to the wooded area. He tied 2 sticks of dynamite to the dog's tail. He lit the fuse, and he went off on a dead run away from the dog. But what Mr. George Mechan didn't do was tie the freaking dog to a tree. And like any faithful dog that sees your master running off into the distance scared, the dog took off after his master. And George Mechan most likely noticed that his dog was on his heels. So he had to take off on a dead run, and he was heading towards the house. He made it to the main house, and he shut the door behind him. Now the dog, with the 2 sticks of dynamite lit behind him, couldn't get in the house, so he ducked in under the summer kitchen. And of course, within a matter of time, the entire summer kitchen was blown to smithereens. And in the explosion, it not only blew the summer kitchen apart, it destroyed 1/2 of the main house and blew all the windows out of the main house in which George Mechan was currently in. Now, luckily, Mechan's wife and baby was in the garden and not in the summer kitchen or anywhere where they could get hit by flying glass. But they were, at least the wife, most likely carrying a baby, was thrown to the ground and was blown off of their feet. Now, with this story being told, again, this was from the Mercersburg Journal, September 5th, 1902, and it is indeed a true story, because they usually didn't put fake stories in there like this. But it is a good example of what you shouldn't do with dynamite. And it's also a good example of a way that you should not put down your dog. And that has been a Tittle Bit of History.